Happy Friday, everybody. Let's see, I need to
Hi.
How's everyone doing?
I'm doing all right. It's Friday and it's been quite a week, so I'm glad to end on this note of running through all the things before we take a break.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to this weekend. So, hey everybody, this is Making Sense with Move to Amend, and this is something we do every Friday. We just make sense of the week and kind of the top news headlines from a lens of corporate power and or the democracy movement. And for anybody who's new here and hasn't tuned in before, you can put your comments, type your questions in whichever platform you're tuning in from. Feel free to say hello and let us know you're here. We do put some of the comments up on the screen, so just a warning and heads up about that. And Move to Amend is the campaign to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that only human beings have constitutional rights, not corporations, and also to get money out of politics. And so just so you guys, there's one of you has like a loud amount of noise happening, something kind of rubbing or something. So I'm not sure. We'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. It might be distracting for people. So yeah, but in addition to working on the We the People Amendment, we also work to bring forth conversations about all the ways that our Constitution really doesn't meet our needs as well as it could, isn't really about centralizing human rights, isn't really about centralizing democracy, isn't really about centralizing protecting people. It's about centralizing property. And there have been some, amendments that have come along the way to improve things and certainly not make it as bad. And thank God for the people's movements that we draw inspiration from who did that work before us. And then the ongoing constant struggle with the ruling class to make sure that those amendments and those protections are actually happening for the people who need it most, especially, as opposed to being usurped by corporations. So it's a deeper conversation, but the We the People Amendment is a very fundamental, foundational piece of what we would need in a constitution that is about protecting human rights. Corporations, which are property, should not have the same rights as people. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. And I know some of you have been around for a while, so feel free to weigh in on any of this stuff that we're going to talk about as we go through the week and kind of share. We've been really busy at Move to Amend because we just launched our campaign for the first quarter of the year. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. We just launched that yesterday, and you can still definitely plug in with that and we'll get you up to date. But first we wanted to talk about the news. And obviously the biggest thing is that we have a new administration and president and vice president in the White House and whatever the name of the VP house is respectively. And maybe somebody else could take the lead on talking about that.
Well, I'm happy to talk about it. I am ready for the holding the feet to the fire conversation. I never even wanted to wait a day for that. But yeah, I mean, we've got some really serious signs coming very early on in this transition of power that we still have a lot of things, a lot of work to do and a lot of things that we need to be pushing back on in this new administration. I think one of the most disappointing things and examples of, how we are very, very much still under corporate rule in this country, in this new administration, is the COVID healthcare plan that came out that Biden released a few days ago, which is pretty antithetical to some of the things that he ran on, like a public option. It is, basically another cash grab for insurance companies and provides tons of subsidies to them for a much more expensive system. So it's basically kind of putting steroids on the Affordable Care Act, if anything. This isn't what he ran on. So this is an example of, saying one thing, and then when it comes down to it, putting profits over people, because the public option was the compromise. The public option is still not, it's different from Medicare for all in that it still costs money at the point of service. You still have premiums, you still have copays, you still have deductibles, you still have out-of-pocket expenses, and it's still part of this larger system that is dictated by industry rather than, actual health of the people who live in this country. So.
And it's basically a way to ensure that private corporations aren't impacted at all, even though they are a predatory force in our healthcare system. And, the principle of healthcare is a human right, which Biden also said he agreed with, is not compatible with the idea that people and companies should be profiting off of people's sickness. And so it's like one or the other, and putting in a public option is sort of the bare minimum nod, and the COVID healthcare plan doesn't even do that. So it is just, and the healthcare industry, these giant corporations gave a huge amount of money to the Biden campaign. So this is what, we're seeing is basically the same business as usual way that the Democratic establishment has always operated. That they'll talk out of one side of their mouth, and then on the other side of their mouth, they will institute policies that benefit their corporate donors.
And I see a comment from Cheryl saying he just started and give the guy some time. The things that we see right out of the gate are the things that we should kind of assume are going to be the trends that we'll continue seeing. If we see evidence otherwise, then, we're happy about the Keystone Pipeline, but we still need to see that play out, right? Like there are some good things, that he is doing in his first 100 days that could be a lot better, but they're good. But they still haven't happened yet. And I, regardless of what party is in, we're here with an analysis around corporate rule. So both parties have corporate rule, embedded in them, and it looks different with each party. But that's our job here, is to give an analysis through the lens of corporate rule. And when a healthcare plan is chosen because it benefits, the profit of the corporations who, dictate it more than the people, then we need to notice that and point it out. And that's what we're here to do.
Well, and also furthermore, a couple things about Biden. One, obviously these policies that are being rolled out, they've had them in mind for months. So there isn't the idea of like, oh, he needs time. No, that's not true. He's been running for office on an agenda. And as Shelley pointed out, an agenda that isn't matching what is happening right out of the gate. So that doesn't make sense. There's no explanation for that. And then on top of that, we need to remember that this is a person who's actually been in government at the national level for decades and decades and decades. So there isn't, I don't see any reason to offer any kind of like pass of like, oh, he needs to figure it out. There's lots of problems. The problems that need to be addressed in terms of healthcare are like, yes, exacerbated by COVID, but those are not new problems in this country. Those are problems that were in part created by the work that Joe Biden has been doing in our government for all of my life. He has been in office longer than I have been alive. If you take his Senate time, the vice president time, and now going forward here. So there's no reason he doesn't need softballs. This is the United States of America, and we are in crisis, and we got rid of the last person with many people with an expectation that there was going to be a shift. And when that shift doesn't happen, giving him a pass for however many months, I don't know how much time you would say makes sense, doesn't serve us in any way. It doesn't at all. Politicians should never have the benefit of the doubt once they get in office. They should deliver, or they should be held accountable.
Yeah, and we're ecstatic that Trump is out. But we can't have that binary thinking where that means that what is replacing him is great. And again, our job is to give the corporate rule analysis. So Biden is a corporate politician and needs scrutinization so that we can actually get the at least some of the agenda that we want out of this administration. So.
Yeah, and I'd like to comment on that as well, because we are at the beginning of his administration, and I think the push has to come now. Like you said, we don't wait until the end. This isn't a first time run for him. And we have a lot of catching up to do. I mean, we just re-entered the Paris Accord. So I am grateful that, he is an adult in the situation and recognizes that existential threat, but we have a long way to go.
Right, and if there isn't pushback, then what you can expect is that they will take as much latitude as they can get in terms of serving a corporate agenda, because at the end of the day, that's the bottom line that put these folks in office. And so the rope that we give them is all going to be taken and used unless we name this. And so, I'm with you that I would love to take a sigh and relax, but this isn't a world that actually is going to get better with sighs and relaxing. That's a very that's a pretty privileged perspective. So you can be a bit relieved that perhaps there isn't going to be as toxic language coming out of the White House probably for the next 4 or however many years. But, in terms of corporations being held accountable, people being served, our crises being steered in the opposite direction, the only way that's going to happen is if we force that to happen. So being quiet doesn't do that. So get ready, because the rest of the things that we're going to talk about that have been unrolled are no more happy than this one. And I'm sorry to say, this is who we elected president in this country. So this is the reality that we're in.
Yeah, and I want to address the comment that was just up from Linda. Dems as a whole don't tend to be bold, and that is what's needed now. How do we get them to go bold? And I just want to segue into the next criticism that we have, and the thing that we want to push back on is the $2,000 stimulus checks. Dems went pretty bold during the Georgia Senate runoffs to try to win. They went really, really bold, and it worked, and they promised $2,000 checks. That was a result of public pressure. If we hadn't said anything and just been like, oh, it's fine, Biden's here, they wouldn't have done that. They did that because the people were demanding it. But now what we're seeing is, and there's been a lot of discussion about $1,400 versus $2,000, but the reality is the reason they won, one of the reasons, I mean, we can do a postmortem, but the campaign tactic that they used most strongly in those last days was $2,000 checks almost immediately after we take the Senate. And there were and this was after the $600 under Trump had already come through. So that's what people thought it meant. We're getting $2,000 checks under the Biden administration. And now what we're hearing is that it will actually be $1,400 checks, and that they're not even going to get to it until March. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that was not what they were saying just a few weeks ago when they were trying to win an election. And so they're just kind of counting on us, like not saying anything or not pointing out that's not really what you said. And the bottom line is we deserve a lot more than $2,000. Every other, country that, is as anywhere near as wealthy as ours, we're the wealthiest, has been supporting like $2,000 a month check, fucking Australia and in Europe and in a lot of other places. That's what they're doing. So the fact that in a country like ours that's wealthier, that this is the best we can do, and then now we're like talking about 1,400, nobody. We shouldn't have to negotiate like this. We should be able to trust that what a campaign promise is a campaign promise, especially in a crisis like this. And it does not help the Dems at all to not do what they said when we are in this kind of, you know, really, really polarized, terrifying, crisis-ridden time.
And as somebody pointed out in the comments, for those who are hoping that the Democrats would be able to hold on to the Senate and the House next year, because we do have these elections so frequently, right? That they could lose that. And these are the kinds of actions that ensure that that will happen, because people get frustrated and, you know, knowing that they only have two options, they'll just vote for the other option, or even more people will disengage, and the amount that is needed to kind of put it over the top. If people don't feel like there's anything worth fighting for because nobody is fighting for them, that is what depresses turnout. That is what causes elections to, you know, go to the worst of the options. And so it's not encouraging. And it's pennies. You know, if you look at like the military budget, for example, you know, which just passed, and they were able to get all the numbers that they needed for that on both sides of the aisle. And then, you know, this $600 each that is like too much. And what this does is ensure stability and health for people. It helps make it so that people don't have to go out and go get exposed. It makes it so that people are, you know, able to feel less afraid. So all of these things are just, it's just cumulative, this impact of fear and anxiety on an already not very stable, not very effective system at meeting people's needs. And to be haggling over $600 each, which, like, granted, is a lot of money to any of us, but in terms of money that the government spends is nothing. And so it's like, it's not about the money. It's about, you know, how much can we get away with not serving people. And that's the principle that our country is coming from. In terms, it's like the opposite of humane or compassionate or caring or, you know, solidarity. And that's part of what Move to Amend has been about all along, is pointing this out, these things that we've come to accept as okay, because maybe this is how it's been the whole time that we've been alive, but this is not how human beings or a country needs to operate. And we can look at examples of how other countries have handled the pandemic crisis to see there's no reason. And as Kelly said, our country actually has more money and more resources to use on top of that. So there's no good explanation.
Yeah. I want to also, Jack Lewis, who I saw was from Eureka, which is where some of us are from too. But you said the $2,000 should be more targeted. And I just wanted to talk about that for a second, because I think that is a common and I know it's very well meaning, and it's, you know, because people are concerned that people who don't need money are going to get it. I want to push back on that a little bit. And this is me coming to this place from, you know, I think, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, I probably would have agreed. But now I, first of all, understand that we can print money, right? Like so it doesn't, we're not the kind of austerity and deficit fears. I don't really subscribe to that framing anymore, because I don't believe it's true. And that's kind of how they use that. Well, we should only, the other problem with that is people who are on any kind of government assistance that is targeted, whether it's food stamps or Medicaid or you know, this is called means testing, where you have to qualify for it. So it creates this whole level of bureaucracy that poor people have to do a lot of work to prove that they deserve it. When the reality is, if we just gave everybody $2,000 checks and then just taxed, you know, based on the way that we do things right now, and then just taxed people later, you know, based on their income, like, it doesn't really matter that much, but it would speed up the process so much and make it so much easier that the people who really need it would appreciate that. And I'm somebody in that category, so I'm speaking for myself, and I think a lot of others, that I would prefer everyone just gets the checks and then they tax for it later from the people who can afford it. That makes a lot more sense in a crisis.
And also, that bureaucracy is very expensive. So then that's like an extra cost on top of the whole thing to have. And we already see that, you know, the IRS is unable to handle what they've been charged with doing. And so it doesn't help to then create some situation where, you know, it's basically kind of haggling. And then also it creates a dynamic where there's just a sense that from people who maybe have, you know, just a little bit more. It's like, how do you decide that? You know, whoever's just a little bit above the cutoff is going to feel resentful of the whole program. And then therefore, but not resentful generally on the government as much as resentful of the people who got that aid. And
exactly.
So it just creates problems.
It's a stigmatization too. It stigmatizes it when it's only these people that get it versus the other. And, you know, there was no stopgap for corporate bailouts, and there's not in this new planning. You know, it's crumbs again for the people and big money for the corporations.
So for Cheryl's asking, like, how do we get word to lawmakers to do it this way? It's not like they don't know about this, but when you contact them and tell them what you want, make sure to make clear that it should be, you know, universal. All programs should be universal, no means testing. That's what it's called, as Shelley said, and that it should just apply across the board for everyone. And then the taxing piece is actually already built in to the system, so new would need to be done for that. And again, this is something that is, you know, this is a policy kind of strategy framework to come from, and it applies to everything. This is why, you know, this applies to healthcare as well. This applies to all aid and support from the government should work in this way. The idea of eliminating student loan debt also, you know, or whether there's free college tuition. It creates all this whole set of problems when you make a cutoff that really is just something, if you look at it in a sort of meta way, maybe some politicians don't even realize this, but really what it is it helps facilitate divide and conquer.
Exactly.
Yeah. The consequences of means testing, even though a lot of well-meaning people might like look at the logic on its face and think that sounds right, though, you know, at the end of the day, the consequences for means testing greatly outweigh the consequences of some people getting money that they don't exactly need desperately. Another thing that I think is important to bring up, only because we heard this so much over the past 4 years, the kids in the cages. That was a huge talking point for why we needed to get Trump out. You know, a lot of people who had been following, you know, the immigration stuff before Trump knew that, you know, there were some terrible things going on before that set the stage for Trump to be able to take it to the next level and actually like codify things that were already happening, you know, not by any kind of, you know, legislation or policy, but they were still happening, like forced sterilization and kids in cages. Those things were happening, but they were made like policy under Trump. And we just kept hearing that, like, that was the, you know, and we're not seeing anything in his plan right now to address that. He also initially said that there would be no deportations in the first 100 days. And we're seeing that there is going to be some, and the sum is such a vague thing that it could include a lot of people. Kind of similar to how, you know, Obama didn't deport anyone who wasn't a criminal, or, you know, some of those talking points, but you can be a criminal just for crossing the border illegally. So that makes you a criminal. And then, you know, so it's all very kind of deceptive. And it's, you know, it's really hard to see that was, you know, such a, I don't know. I just thought we would see a lot better in that first 100 days plan around immigration. So, you know, this is the camps, everything. This is all, you know, this is all profiting large corporations. They all have a huge stake in these systems continuing. And so we do need to question why these systems aren't, you know, being interrupted in any kind of significant way.
And so many of these, I mean, the same goes for the conversation we already had about the insurance corporations. These companies are giving to both parties They're giving to both. They're giving to candidates who are running against each other, basically kind of ensuring that no matter what happens, they're going to have a seat at the table and their interests are going to be protected. Which goes back to why we need the We the People Amendment, right? We need to ban all corporate contributions and participation in the political process. We need to eliminate the idea that corporations can have paid lobbyists doing the work of talking to our Congress members when we're doing the work of trying to, survive and get by. I wish I could just sort of let my lobbyists know what I want them to tell Biden this week or whatever, right? And then furthermore, it's not just about the money in the electoral and the political process. That is a symptom of the fact that corporations have constitutional rights per Supreme Court interpretation. And one of the things that is worth mentioning in this week redux is that yesterday was the 11-year anniversary of Citizens United passing. And a lot of people still think, because this is what the dominant message is, that corporate constitutional rights started 11 years ago with Citizens United, but no, it started, over 100 years ago, and there's precedent that's built upon. And then, so Citizens United was, it's now no longer the most recent example, but it is, the most kind of prominent example in the last 20 years. And there's nothing that is impacting our ability to influence our government, or inability to influence our government, over the ability that corporations have to influence our government than the issues related to this. And so I want to tie it back to the solution, since we are talking about all that is wrong with this, but the solution is to plug in with Move to Amend. And if you're working on any of these issues, whether it's healthcare or immigration reform, to understand that the We the People Amendment will help make those efforts more powerful, more effective. And so we need to work together and see the connections.
That's right. I would also like to talk about his plan to reopen most K through 12 schools in the next 100 days. As somebody who is in science, and as somebody who is a single parent of a 5-year-old who should have started kindergarten this year, and I have to work from home while parenting, while being the teacher and attention giver and, all of those things, it's very hard. It's hard on me. It's hard on my child. It's excruciating some days. But I don't want him going back to school until it's safe. And with the vaccine rollout plan that we're currently looking at, it's not enough for schools to be opened in the next 100 days. Teachers unions are saying, no, this is unsafe. We don't feel good about this. And yet this is what's happening. And so, on a personal level, it's terrifying. I'm, stuck between a rock and a hard place. And my government isn't going to help me stay home. They want to push my kid back into school. They want to push everybody back to work. That's what they're trying to push for. And they're doing it prematurely. It's not based in science. So while this is an administration that is going to listen more than the last one did, we can't just pretend that they put science above all else. They're putting profits and the economy ahead of the health and safety of our teachers and our children and everyone that they interact with in their personal lives. And it's very concerning.
Yeah, I didn't realize that teachers weren't even on the priority list for vaccinations. That's just nuts. That's a whole frontline set of employees who have just been thrown under the bus through every stage of this pandemic situation. So I really hope that they continue to fight this and that we find ways to help them in doing that. I mean, before the pandemic, teachers unions were flexing a lot of muscle with some really powerful strikes. And this, the wages and classroom size and money going to private charter schools instead of public schools and all of that. And this seems like just completely related to it. It's like, let's just throw the children and the teachers in, and, we're never going to get on top of this situation, vaccine or otherwise, especially as we are seeing, the virus morph the way that viruses do, if we just continue to kind of act like we can proceed as normal. And it's just, we just need a month and then we'll be back on track. And that delusion is why, a year later, we are in worse shape than, we started, and we never got on top of it in this country. And that's just going to continue. It's so scary.
Well, aren't we missing a lot of vaccines too? I mean, they're not even really there. They were talking about this big rollout and they're not even there. And now they're talking about, the CDC is talking about changing their guidelines for the second dose being Moderna or the other one. And there's just so much that we don't know about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's scary, and we've been lied to so much. I mean, take DeSantis right now, I mean, he has been hiding the information and covering the, banning public health officials from even discussing the results of our testing here in Florida.
Yeah, do you want to talk more about that case? Because I only saw it fleetingly. A lot of people might not have even heard about it.
The Rebecca Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she was rearrested this week. She turned herself in. She's a COVID data scientist. And she said she was turning herself in to protect her family from continued police violence. They kicked in her door and pointed guns at her children a couple of weeks ago. Oh, it's horrible. And she said she's ready to fight whatever they throw at her. And she's turning herself in to the police in Florida. The governor will not win this war on science and free speech, and he will not silence those who speak out. So this is, like I said, the second time she had been arrested. This arrest was for, they said that she took information. And of course, he banned any of that information from going out. So it's basically a war on truth, and she's, thrown to the side of it.
It's scary that the governors in some of these states have that kind of, power and will use it in that way. It means
there's
that.
Also,
no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, and then we've got, a liberal, darling governor like Gavin Newsom here, who I just read, he's not responding to comments, but, a daycare workers union was in negotiations with his office to try to get more PPE and other things to make their job safer, and they were denied on all of it. So, you've got like the really diabolical, it's either, this is what we're working with. This is the scale. We've got DeSantis, and then our, Gavin Newsom is like, on the other side of the spectrum that we're working with. It's a terrible spectrum. It's a really bad spectrum.
Well, and Newsom came out with the idea that schools were going to be opening sooner than everybody else that I had heard. California was the first place that I heard and saw that it was like, okay, right as we're still not even seeing what the full effects of whatever the holiday peak is going to be. A couple of weeks ago, he announced, all right, beginning of March, we're going to be back on track. Everyone's going to go back to school and everything's fine. So let's go. Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, I was just reading this comment in here, and I'm not sure if you noticed it here. JD said, environment, this is concerning a 79-year-old private citizen and retired Martin County, Florida County Commissioner. She was hit with a $4 million in damages fine for sending a single email to her public officials.
Wow.
It was a environmental company, wasn't it, JD?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like he's saying.
Yeah, it was I'll find it, but she was denied leniency on this one this past week.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't, I'm curious about the details, but I don't think there's any details that could make that sound any less shocking.
Yeah. So continuing on, and maybe we can kind of flip through these a little bit more quickly because there is a lot of bad news here, and that might not be the best way to leave everybody. But
And good too.
What?
And good too. We started our campaign launch.
That's great. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, let's try to get that sooner. But a few more things that we want to just mention and make sure are on your radar and that we are talking about and we're responding to is that so a lot of companies have paused their political action committees, either just because it's kind of in bad form, but also because cost. But trade groups are still covering that. So basically, it's another example of the deception of corporate rule. Companies are saying in their PR, we're not lobbying, we're taking the time out on all this, given everything going on and the crises, etc. But meanwhile, trade groups are out there doing the same lobbying, representing their interests, making sure that the wheels and the gears still go for corporate rule. And so these symbolic choices on the part of companies to decide how they want to do their lobbying and then using it as a PR opportunity to make everyone feel as though they're not jamming stuff through is just absolutely ridiculous and something that most we don't know. It just doesn't get talked about. It doesn't get seen, and so all we see is their PR.
And so a lot of you probably heard about after Josh Hawley was caught, cheering on the insurrectionists on January 6th, and I guess he had a book in the works through Simon and Schuster, right? And they made headlines by saying we are dropping his book and we don't want anything to do with that guy, and everybody cheered. But what happened was a company called Regnery, I don't know how to pronounce it, picked up Hawley's book. Regnery is a subsidiary of Simon and Schuster. So it is the same company under a different name that is still going to publish his book, and they're still going to make money off of it. And we didn't hear the second shoe drop, right? We just heard the first, and that's often how these things go. We hear about the move that they made, but we don't hear about what they did instead. And they're always doing something instead. It's always about profit. It's always about the bottom line. Everything they do, public relations wise, is not because corporations have a conscience or a moral compass. It is because they see it as threatening their brand or their image. But that doesn't mean they necessarily really want to disconnect from those entities. They just don't want to be perceived as connected with them. And we just need that skepticism always needs to stay up. We cannot be praising Twitter. We can't be praising all these corporations for doing the bare minimum. If this was a democratic system, all of this would have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, well, and it's baked in that they're incentive is to maximize profits. That's actually literally, what has been determined by law is the purpose of a corporation. If they take actions that are determined to potentially undermine that bottom line and maximizing profits for shareholders can actually sue the agents in the company and make the case that their rights are being violated. And so it's outrageous because there's also human beings associated with all these decisions. And so that's where, we want to put the, how could somebody be so two-faced? But the reality is, it's a system that is operating the way that it is, designed and legally mandated to operate. And so our outrage doesn't even really make sense. What makes sense is for us to remove this cancerous impulse in our society that profits are what matter more than anything else. And so, when we have, whether it's, Nazi free speech or healthcare for people versus profits, it's like we're always, the wrong decision is being made because the DNA is profits matter more than anything else. And so that's what, the coding that the system comes back to. And any individual operating is sort of irrelevant compared to that coding. And that's why we need to address the coding at the systemic level and make clear that, you know, corporations don't have rights, and that the purpose of corporations is not to maximize profit for shareholders. To the extent that we're going to have corporations operating, they should have responsibility and accountability to the environment, to the public, to their workers.
Absolutely.
That they operate in. And that is all something that we could build in to the fabric instead of what we have now. There's something about it.
That was the case that JD was bringing up with the woman in Florida. It was about a mining company that was degrading the Everglades, and they imposed a multi-million-dollar fine on her. Said it hurt their public image.
I feel like we need to talk about that story more in the live report next week, because I'm still like, wait, what? Well, under what logic exactly? Because even though the system is already crazy and spits out so many things, then you have a story like this, and it's just like, hold on, why does their public image matter more than talking about environmental devastation? How do we live in a system where that can possibly be true? So there's one more corporate rule story that we want to share, and then we want to talk about our campaign for the next 3 months and how you can plug in with it. As Jack said earlier, Move to Amend kind of got lost among all the other Trump disasters, and that's true. And that's part of why we have a plan to kind of come out big this year, and we need your help to pull it off. But first, we do just want to point out this last story. Instacart has fired all of their drivers who are working to unionize. And this is on top of Instacart being part of the campaign to pass Prop 22 in California, which created a special carve out for companies like the app companies like Instacart and DoorDash and Uber and all that, so that they are not employees and they do not actually have to pay them a minimum wage because they're just contractors. And there's a whole other set of, just employment rights and protections that these workers now can be denied as a special carve out because they spent millions of dollars and bought an election here in California. And then on top of that, now as people are working to try and unionize, they can just eliminate everybody because no employment rights for contractors to speak of, and start over. And in this desperate economy, you know that they're going to have workers that they can hire on who at this point are basically scabs. But how can you ask people not to try and make some more money when we're in the situation that we're in? And it's one of the only ways to get a job these days is to work for these companies.
So yeah, it's really scary. It's really scary that this is going to keep happening. Everything, Prop 22 is going to spread across the country, and the move that Instacart made is going to be made by more and more of these gig corporations, because that was the whole point of Prop 22, was to give them that kind of control over their workers. So it's really scary. It's in a state like California that, is supposed to be on the leading edge of human rights. We're not, and I always laugh when I hear it, but a lot of people perceive us that way. But this well-funded campaign worked, and these industries won. I also want to point out that another Biden gripe is Kamala Harris's sister's husband was I think the main spokesperson for Uber in the Prop 22 campaign. So he was at the fore of this campaign that was meant to destroy workers' rights in the fastest growing industry in our, capitalism and decay society. And then he was also this Prop 22 champion was also considered for Biden's cabinet. And that would have also been weird because he's related to Kamala Harris. So there was just a lot of stuff there that I think we need to pay attention to. This administration is pretty clearly not for workers' rights, especially when it comes to the gig economy. And we're probably not going to see a lot of protection for these workers from this administration.
So let's talk about what we're doing in response to all of this and how we can turn this around. So again, for anybody who tuned in late, just a reminder, Move to Amend's main campaign and main work is to pass the We the People Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And we have had that amendment introduced in the House of Representatives 4 times. So with every ending of Congress and the new Congress coming in, we need to have it reintroduced. And then all of the sponsors that we had need to be, reacquired. And so we ended the 116th Congress with 75 co-sponsors, counting our lead, Pramila Jayapal. And that was our goal for the year. So thank you, everybody who helped make that happen last year and then the year before as well, because Congress is 2 terms. And so now we need to get it reintroduced, and have to say that Representative Jayapal is going to be our lead again, and we expect that it will be introduced next month. We don't know the exact timing because we are angling to get 48 again, just for continuity's sake for all of us who have been doing this work. It makes it easier, and so the timing will be somewhat that'll be dependent on that. But last time it was introduced, towards the end of February, I think it was February 22nd. So probably something similar to that again. So that means that right now, though, since we know that we're going to get it reintroduced and the earmark for 48 has been filed with the clerk in the House, we can get started asking people to commit that they will come on and support the amendment. So our goal for the first quarter of the year, our goal for 2021, I almost said 2017, 2021 is 100 co-sponsors. And we are going to try and get them all in the first quarter of the year and go in with a big splash because, as Jack said, it's been really hard with COVID, and also so much of the distraction of how Washington D.C. has been operating, which isn't necessarily going to be that much better. But we now know how to lobby via Zoom and reach out, and the kind of disorientation that we faced last year as a result of trying to figure out how to organize virtually. We've figured some of that out. So we want you and we need you to join with us on this campaign. You can see we have targeted about 135 Congress members that we feel like are the best targets. And so if you live in a district where those folks are, then you can jump right in and help us either get them to recommit because they're on the list because they already have been a co-sponsor, or they have signed our pledge to amend, or depending on which caucuses they are members of in Congress, we think that they would be a good target, or their voting record and where they live. Maybe they live in a district where we've already passed an initiative and for whatever reason they haven't come on to support, even though the voters of their district have told them that they want to see their representative pass this amendment. And so that's what we'll be working on. And we just launched that call yesterday, and we'll be putting the recording up today. And if we could share the link, that'd be great. And Shelly or Jenny, do you guys want to say anything about that campaign too?
I mean, I'm just really excited about it because I know that we can do it. I don't think we've ever set such a ambitious goal in a short period of time, but also, I've just seen us blow these goals out of the water year after year with a lot less effort. So I know that this push in this first quarter is really going to set us up for success in the new Congress. And everybody who wants to join this can. In fact, I think all 3 of us here you know, did not have any lobbying experience until we started doing this work. I would have thought that's something other people do. I don't really know. I don't see myself doing that. And you know, I would like to see the kind of self-respect as a constituent that I've come to have through doing this kind of work. I'd like to see more people find that kind of self-respect, but everybody can lobby. And even if you've never done it before, even if you feel like you don't really understand this issue well enough to talk to an elected official about it, A, I can promise you probably understand it more than they do. But B, we are also here to support any meetings that you have. And in the age of Zoom, it makes it super easy for somebody from the Move to Amend national team to come in and join the meeting that you schedule with your representative and be able to answer some of those tough questions that maybe are harder for you to answer. But we do need you, because they listen to constituents. They don't listen to national organizations when they're looking to sign on to legislation. So that's why it needs to be a team effort. And we need all of our folks on the ground to be kind of doing their part as constituents, and we will back you up and give you all the support that you need in doing it.
Yeah, I agree too. Y'all have been able to lay it all out. It makes it so simple, because it's like, we need this done, and y'all have made the path to reaching out and how to do it very simple and doable for anybody who's never done it before. Or
yeah,
but y'all work so hard. You're amazing. Just, I'm in awe.
Jenny's on our team too. You had a different, very important part than creating materials, but yeah. So what it is, and so what we're asking you to do, so what does it mean to help? So first of all, the website is on the bottom of the screen, movetoamend.org, and then /117, which is for the 117th Congress, 117 campaign. Go there. You can see all of the information. You can see who are the targets. If your Congress member is not a target,
Caitlin, I think your thing went out. So if your congressperson isn't a target, I think what she was going to say is that you can look at neighboring targets and helping us organize constituents there. So, like, for instance, my representative, Doris Matsui, is a target, but I think we can get her back on pretty easily. But there are, you know, other neighboring districts that I could, you know, be connected with some of the Move to Amend supporters there and see if they want to help get theirs on board. And then we, you know, it's just, we just want to organize as much as possible in our districts and our neighboring districts to get the old co-sponsors back on, and then to get, basically we just need 25 more, because we got, well, a little more than that because we lost a few, but you know, we can get, I think it's
35.
8 or 69. That should be very easy to just bring them back on in the new Congress. And then we need to just get up to 100, and we can do that. We're so good at this. We have the numbers, you know. I mean, once we can get that meeting and we can say, this is how many petition signers you have in your district. It's usually a lot, because we have a lot of petition signers. We have almost 500,000. So in any given district, there's going to be probably some impressive number that is going to cause the representative to think, maybe this is something I need to consider. In a lot of states like Ohio, Massachusetts, California, and more, there have been both state level resolutions and ballot initiatives that have passed, and also some like local resolutions. And so if it's a congressperson whose district voted in favor of this in a statewide ballot initiative, or a town in their district passed a resolution or passed a local ballot initiative, these things are really powerful. And that's why the grassroots groundwork that we've laid over the last 11 years is powerful. We just have to get in front of them and show them what we've done. But I've seen it happen time and time again. Once we can get in front of them and show them, they have a hard, you know, it's kind of a hard thing to say no to, unless they're deeply in the pockets of industries that they are worried about losing funding from. That's pretty much the only thing that's going to stand in the way, is how entrenched they are. And then, then they should get primaried. But that's another
Yeah.
camp.
Yeah, so basically all we're looking and all we need is 3 to 5 constituents, and then set up a meeting. That's it. We'll walk through the steps. It will be that easy to lobby your congressperson. And now that we can do it online, everything's being done by Zoom. You could do it from the comfort of your own house, which makes it even better.
Yeah, it's the silver lining to this campaign, because in the past we have encouraged people to lobby in district, and then in the summer we'd have a big event, a big conference in Washington, D.C., and people, not everybody has the means to go to Washington, D.C. and lobby their congressperson. So while it was awesome and powerful to do, it left a lot of people out. And this time, that's the silver lining of the age that we're in, is that all of us can do this. And you are not going to be alone. So just really encourage you to go to movetoamend.org/117campaign. 117 meaning this new Congress is the 117th Congress. And just look at, we did a webinar last night that you can, kind of get a really good idea of the outline, but also going to our website and looking at all of the resources that we have. I think you'll find it really impressive and comforting, and it will make it all feel a lot less intimidating, because we've really done a lot of work to make it super easy for everybody. So hopefully some of you guys can show up and participate in this campaign. Also, the goal is to have 100 co-sponsors by March 31st. But that's not like a meaningful cutoff. It's just because we think we can do it, and that's a goal that we've set for ourselves. But we'd like to get more than that. Or if it takes a few of them take a little bit longer, because sometimes it takes some time to work on these offices to push them. But that's our goal, and we think we can do it. But we also know that we need you. So get in touch with us and sign up for that. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to cover?
Maybe just other ways they can get involved if lobbying isn't. You want to go ahead and?
Yeah, I mean, right now that's our main campaign, and it's a really great way into this work. But we also, if you haven't signed the petition, like when I talked earlier about lobbying reps and then seeing how many people sign the petition. Yes, we get your email address when you sign the petition, and we can email you and you end up on our blast list. But a lot of people don't know there's a lot more to this petition than that. It's not a petition that you would use to get a ballot initiative or that kind of thing, but it is a petition that we know in every district how many supporters there are, and then we can use that information to pressure politicians. Like if they have 1,100 people, which is the case where I live, 1,100 people have signed a petition in my district. That's how I got my rep to sign on. And, so adding your name to that list, even if you do nothing else, is a way to communicate to your legislator that you're in support of this. If they're, if somebody else went in. So we encourage you to sign the petition, movetoamend.org/petition.
I think it's motion on this one.
Motion. Yeah, I think both of them work technically, but
Okay.
I think motion is more direct. I think you can get to it for petition, but that page will also give you a lot of resources for how to go out and get more petition signatures too. So that's more of a petition page is more for like volunteers, and then the motion is just if you want to just sign it. Our movement education program, we really encourage you to check that out. It used to be kind of an internal thing that we had developed for our volunteers and affiliate leaders so that they could do effective local organizing. Let me talk to my child for a second, Solomon, and be quiet. Multitasking as a single parent working from home. Now it's available to everyone. So this is a program that, looks at the history of movements and what has succeeded, what tactics have worked really well, and what kinds of things have happened that have hindered and handicapped movements, so that we all are, have a shared analysis around, because we know that we can't win without a movement, right? That much we know, but what makes a movement work and what can splinter and harm a movement. And anti-oppression training is part of that, because, we want, a multiracial, multi-generational, cross-class movement. And that's how we win. So
movement building without it.
Exactly. So we really encourage you to check that out, movetoamend.org/education. And that is now available for free to everyone. And we've seen great success from that. And thank you to our Radical Guide for hosting that for us. And then finally, we are a grassroots organization, like capital G. We do not take any, large foundation or corporate donations. We rely on regular people giving what they can. And that's why our average donation is $40, and we've been doing this work. And when our budget's never been big because of that, but it's been enough for us to really make a lot of headway. And so that's why we believe in the power of grassroots. But we also need money. Last year was a rough year. We weren't even sure if we were going to survive. We had to do voluntary layoffs when everything was very uncertain. It was scary. We did come out of it enough to go into this year fully staffed and have what we need for this initial push. But we always could use more support, and especially in the form of monthly sustaining donations, because that allows us to actually plan out. A lot of nonprofits get big grants, and so they can kind of predict how they're going to do. We are just always flying by the seat of our pants because of the nature of how we fundraise. So we're being really honest with you about that, kind of explaining, like, giving, if you were going to give $100 at the end of the year, maybe consider, giving $5 a month to this movement. And that allows us to, budget and plan and strategize, because there are so many challenges ahead of us, and it really helps us to do that. Someone asked, why are some reps not on the list? Caitlin might have explained this when I was distracted a little earlier, but I'll readdress it. We identified the 135 targets on a number of different criterion. One being, did they co-sponsor in the past? So boom, if they've already been a co-sponsor, they're obviously going to be at the top of the list to go back and get them to sign back on, because that's low-hanging fruit. I think we looked at the Progressive Caucus. So everybody who's on the Progressive Caucus is a target. I can't quite remember all the other criteria, but I know that there was, I wasn't part of that process of making those targets. But it was definitely well thought out, strategic. So
if you have a rep on that list that that is your rep, or somebody you feel you can move over into the support category, just because they're not on the list doesn't mean you can't lobby them as well. Right. These are just folks, like she said, that have been identified of meeting a higher level of criteria, ones that we're pretty confident we can get on in the next 3 months.
And we've gotten people on that we didn't expect. So that's why we don't want to deter people from going after other, those other than the targets. But we definitely, if somebody is like checking, all those boxes, that we read that as low hanging fruit and worthwhile of putting at least the front loading effort in. Once we get those 100 co-sponsors, it's going to be a lot easier to get the other ones, because that's just how that works. The more people sign on, the more other reps look and go, wow, it's a lot of people signed on. I guess maybe I should join, so that's kind of how that works. Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to end with one more last ditch, if you can give to the Move to Amend, especially right now, especially if you can't be part of this campaign, financially supporting it is extremely powerful way to support it too. So, Appreciate, and there's no amount too small or too big as far as we're concerned. And you know, I give $5 a month because I'm low income. Everybody on our staff gives. So if that's any indication of how much we believe in what we're doing.
And work for free.
Yeah,
They've all been working for free all year. They voluntarily
I did pull donations
financially furloughed themselves. Nobody took a break. They just, you know, didn't get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
And still got so much work done. So just really amazing. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in to this episode of Making Sense. I was a little nervous about being on here my first time. And again, I'm so grateful for you, Shelley, and all of the MTA folks.
Same. And the whole reason Jenny came on is because I was terrified and nervous because I recently became a full-time single parent, and attempting a live stream with a 5-year-old in the house seemed pretty intimidating. And Jenny said, I will back you up. And so here we are. Both of us got our nerves and we did a great job. And so did my kid. And I would like to give a round of applause to my kid for being quiet.
Yeah,
so, all right, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Sorry about all the womp womp, bad news, criticism, but that's just what we do. We are also the most optimistic people you'll ever meet. That's why we're here trying to change the system, and we will not stop. So thank you for being in it with us, and have a great weekend.